Never Mind the Buzzwords is a community event from Jigsaw Better Business. Taking place bi-monthly, its aim is to build a community of businesses and professionals where you can learn, share and connect. It's about going beyond the jargon and coming away from each session with knowledge, tangible tools, tips, strategies, and hopefully an extended network. Each event is focused either on people or a process. In the process sessions, we talk about how we deliver value in our business. Topics here include lean tools and thinking, operational excellence, sustainability, and digital transformation. In the people sessions, we look beyond the process to the who, discussing topics like leadership, teams, culture, and professional development. Never Mind the Buzzwords isn't just an event that you attend, it's an event to participate in. So get involved in the conversation, put your camera on if you can, share your thoughts, ideas or questions in the chat, or feel free to unmute yourself. And don't forget to stay in touch. We have a LinkedIn group where we upload resources and recordings from this community. And if you follow Never Mind the Buzzwords on Eventbrite, you'll be notified whenever we post a new event. Okay, so as I said, we're talking about psychological safety. We are, I suppose, hopefully by the end of today, you'll come away with a little bit of a better idea of what psychological safety is, why it's important, how we can develop it, and why it's so essential for good teams. Just to get a sense of everyone's familiarity, I'm just going to put a poll up. How familiar are you with that term psychological safety? Is it something that you've never really had much experience with or never really come into contact with? Is it something maybe you've heard of a little bit, maybe you're somewhat familiar? Maybe you think you're in a very psychologically safe team, and maybe it's a wider organizational thing where you feel, yeah, actually my organization as a whole are very committed to building psychological safety. So just out of curiosity, I'll give you a couple of minutes to answer that poll that should be in front of you. At the moment, I can see a majority, about 56%, are saying, I'm familiar with the concept, but my team isn't. So that's kind of an interesting one. I suppose you can't have psychological safety with just one person. So it'll be hopefully good for you to expand maybe how to build it with your team. Another 29% are saying, I think I'm in a psychologically safe team. I'll just pop the results up there for you. So 14% said, I don't know much about psych safety. That's totally fine. Hopefully then you'll come away from today with a bit of knowledge. Again, 52% saying they're familiar, but their team isn't. 29 saying, I think I'm in a psychologically safe team. And just 5% are saying my organization is very committed to building psychological safety. So, unfortunately, kind of a little minority there who has it as a wider psychological safety environment in their organization. But that's good for me to know. Just wanted to get a sense of who's in the room. So as I said earlier, feel free to unmute yourself, ask any questions, use the chat to interact with each other. You're more than welcome to make it as interactive as you like. So I suppose let's dive in by thinking about the world of work and our work environments that many of us are in. So if we think back to the Industrial Revolution, workers, a lot of the work involved using your hands and legs, right? It was people's physical strength or physical mobility which would allow them to do their job effectively. You can see in this picture, there's a man just kind of standing, watching everyone. So you can see that, a manager would be someone who's kind of observing and can see, yeah, you're doing your work properly or not. So in those roles, very much using the physical aspect in order to get your job done. Whereas now it's more about using people's brains. It's about, we've automated a lot of the maybe simpler tasks or the more manual tasks. So now a lot of work involves using people's brain power rather than their muscle power. And that means that when it comes to the role of the manager or the leader, we can't expect any one person to know all the answers. We need to harness the collective intelligence of the people that we work with. And that is, you can see in that image there on the right, every one of those little sticky notes is people coming together and sharing their ideas. And that means that you need an environment in which people can share their ideas, that they feel my voice is welcomed. There was research that suggests that, even more, I suppose if we go back to the early 2000s, not as far back as the Industrial Revolution, even comparing it 20 years ago, teams nowadays spend 50% more time collaborating than they did 20 years ago. But according to Gallup 2017 poll, only 3 out of 10 employees strongly agreed with that their opinions count at work. So we're seeing the way the world of work has changed. We need people's opinions, but do people actually feel like they can speak up, and do they feel like their voice is heard and valued? So ideally, we want people to feel comfortable contributing and bringing that collective intelligence together. Just to share your own experiences, just for a moment, if you think about a time when you voiced an opinion or idea, maybe in work or maybe outside of work, and it didn't go well, right? Maybe people just ignored you, or maybe they laughed at you or rejected your idea. Just maybe pop into the chat. How did that feel? Right. So a time when you contributed a thought or an idea and it didn't go well. Anyone like to share how did they feel in that moment? You can always unmute yourself if you want to, or else pop it into the chat. Okay, Declan saying isolated. Yeah. Hi, Mary.
Hi, Julie. I was just trying to reflect on an occasion, and when that did happen, and it was just like dead silence, and you really feel exposed then to, not really sure as to how you describe it. You're just feeling really exposed, and you're thinking, well, I'm not going to do that again.
Yeah.
I was far more reluctant to do so.
Definitely. Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for sharing that, Mary. Yeah, so kind of you're feeling, okay, that wasn't worth it. That wasn't worth the effort. A few people popping into the chat saying, yeah, Katrina saying I felt small, definitely didn't want to contribute again in the future. Kelly was feeling stressed. Aisling feeling like I shouldn't have said anything. So a few people kind of mentioning that they go, I'm not going to do that again. Gavin saying sometimes orgs don't want to know about the negatives or about a process or a system that can prevent a culture, a speak up culture. Definitely. Yeah. So sometimes it's kind of saying, oh yeah, we don't want to hear, we only want to hear the positives. So you feel negative then if you bring up a problem. Yeah, feeling ignored. Exactly. So yeah, a lot of people have had some sort of similar experience where they're getting a message that, okay, I shouldn't do that again. That felt uncomfortable. I don't want to repeat that feeling. Right. And, I presume like none of us would want to make our colleagues feel ignored or stressed or small. And similarly, probably your colleagues I would hope, don't want to make you feel small or ignored or like you don't matter. But we can, kind of accidentally do that. And so it's quite natural, but what we need is to really intentionally create the environment where people feel comfortable expressing and being themselves. So that's just one definition, in particular for anyone who is saying that they haven't really come across the term before. This is what psychological safety is. It's a condition where you feel included, you feel safe to learn, safe to contribute, and safe to challenge the status quo, without fear of being embarrassed, being marginalized, being punished in some way. So I mentioned earlier, you can't have just one person feeling psychologically safe. It has to be that shared belief. It has to be that environment. Um, and it's that environment where they feel safe to take interpersonal risks. So interpersonal risks would be things like getting up and speaking in front of a group, or voicing a concern or a problem or a mistake, or getting something wrong. It's anything where you risk putting yourself out there and being judged potentially by others. And I have another definition that comes from Amy Edmondson. She's one of the main researchers in this field. And she's saying that it's a belief that one will not be punished or humiliated for speaking up with ideas, questions, concerns, or mistakes. And you might be looking at that thinking, okay, the word humiliated or punished might seem a little bit strong. No one would intentionally humiliate another person in my organization. But just that first or secondary word of that definition, belief, that's a really important word there. It's that it could be just a perception that you'll be embarrassed or that you'll be punished in some way. It might not even be a reality. It could be a reality, like we mentioned in the chat. You feel that, you experience those negative emotions when people ignore you or reject you. But it could even just be that belief. So that's kind of makes it a little bit trickier then, that we're not solely dealing in what objectively exists. We're also thinking about people's perceptions, the perceived threat. And that researcher, Amy Edmondson, she came across this concept kind of by accident. It was back in 1999. She was doing a lot of research in hospitals and was studying, say, the question, do better hospital teams make fewer medication errors? Which you would think, yeah, surely a better team makes fewer mistakes. But the data told her that actually the better teams were making more errors. And so it seemed counterintuitive, and she kind of went, oh no, what's happening? But she realized when she looked into it a bit more that actually better teams weren't making more mistakes, they were reporting more mistakes, meaning that fewer errors were being hidden. So that instead of them being hidden, they could be learned from. So it was just a more open climate where you do feel that you can learn from and express and say, I made a mistake. Here's how to rectify it. Here's how to avoid it in the future. Here's what we're learning from it. So there's been, quite a lot of research since that time in 1999. Over the last, 20 plus years, research has really been demonstrating that organizations with a higher level of psychological safety outperform in almost any metric in comparison to the organizations that have lower psychological safety. So it's a really, really key component of those high performing teams and organizations. When you have an environment with psychological safety, you will see a willingness to help. So people are willing to contribute and do something for others rather than just for their own benefit. You will have a greater inclusion. Diverse teams can sometimes, when you have a lot of diversity, sometimes people can feel that they don't really belong. But when you have that psychological safety, you're more likely to get much more inclusive environments. So it's not about trying to get everyone to think and act the same way. It's about harnessing the power of diversity. You can have more open conversation. There's open dialogue. People, again, as we mentioned, don't feel as afraid to speak up or challenge ideas. And there's a very constructive attitude towards risk and failure. So again, when things go wrong, people focus on what can be learned rather than who's to blame. So it's better to fail and learn from it rather than fail and hide it, or fail and not notice it and then continue on and fail again. So it's a constructive attitude where we're trying to avoid repeatable failures. So if we have that lack of psychological safety, which unfortunately is fairly common, because as we mentioned, like, nobody wants to go into work and look incompetent or look negative. So, we kind of try and protect ourselves. So sometimes this environment of psychological danger is existing. And you'll have people having that fear of admitting mistakes. There might be then a blame culture because people are kind of trying to protect their own backs. People are less likely then to share different views, and it just kind of repeats itself basically. And the decision making is influenced more by the group dynamics rather than what's the best option to choose. Whereas on the other hand, if you have that comfort admitting mistakes, you're then able to learn from failure. Everyone's able to openly share ideas, and your decision making and your innovation is going to improve, right? So it sounds all great. If it's so valuable and it's so helpful, why is it missing? Why do we often see teams where it's not really prevalent, or maybe you have it in one team but not in other teams in your company? Pop your answers into the chat, your thoughts or questions or comments on it, or else feel free to unmute yourself either. Why do you think it's not more common? Why do we think that every team doesn't have this? Any ideas there?
Is it management? Does it trickle down from management?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the management has a big impact on it. And yeah, I suppose it's if say for example, if you learned to be a manager from someone who maybe had no idea about this psychological safety, and then you become a manager and you pass it down, it can kind of follow on that way. So yeah, exactly. People often just learn from other managers. Just looking at the chat, then people saying trust, it requires trust, exactly, and trust doesn't just happen automatically. Carlos mentioning about the kind of culture and coaching, maybe it's more of a control and command approach in some organizations because maybe it feels safer for managers if they feel, okay, I can tell someone what to do and then they'll do it, and then I can kind of manage them better. Gavin saying companies under pressure to deliver, and sometimes they are forgetful on the human side. Yeah, that's a really good point of like when you're focused on results and targets and metrics, you can forget that there are humans doing the work. So yeah, exactly, that kind of balancing act between results and people. It should be part of the values of an organization to start with. Yeah, definitely agree with you there, Declan. It needs to be the kind of, the company-wide thing. And yeah, exactly, if people don't pay enough attention to cultivating it, it's more important to kind of get the task done. That's what people tend to focus more on. So, and sometimes I suppose that's an obstacle then. They kind of say, we don't have time to get everyone's opinion, or we don't have time to, make changes and build this culture. We need to focus on the task or the work at hand. Yeah, Declan, good point. Education and awareness on the topic. Yeah, I'd come across quite a lot of people who maybe have never heard of the term before. So if you're not aware of it, how can you build it really? A few other comments: unsuitable senior managers, not being team focused. Yeah. And then, yeah, the blame culture versus the learning culture, how organizations treat mistakes has an impact. It has to be part of the continuous improvement mindset. Yeah, definitely, rather than lip service to improvement. Yeah, definitely, Katrina. Yeah, we have to have that mindset that's built into it. Okay, brilliant. Yeah, those are really good comments. Yeah, some researchers suggest that only about 47% of employees across the world describe their workplaces as psychologically safe and healthy. So if we don't even have half of employees feeling that, we're missing something, right? So, this is even, we can see it missing even in situations where the consequences are life or death. The stakes are really high, like even in kind of the cockpit of an airplane or in a hospital where, people are giving out medication. The stakes are so high, but still research has found that psychological safety can be missing from it. So there definitely are obstacles to developing it, which we need to kind of address. So picture this scenario, right? If you're, say, for example, if you worked in a hospital, right? Maybe you're a newly qualified nurse, and you're taking care of babies that were born prematurely. This is an example from the Fearless organization, which is a book by Amy Edmondson. But again, you could imagine something similar in your own workplace, in your own field. You're newly qualified, right? So this nurse, she's taking care of babies that have been born prematurely, and you've been taught the newly established best practice, that it's, to provide certain medication. And your colleague then, a very experienced doctor, hasn't prescribed this particular medication. You're about to remind the doctor about the medication, but then you remember that the last time your colleague went and challenged this doctor, you heard him publicly berating that other nurse, when she questioned his orders. So, everyone's doing this calculation where you go, okay, hang on, what's the possible risks? What are the possible rewards here? All right. So if you make a mistake, you have the option of speaking up and maybe challenging your manager or someone senior to you, or you have the option of keeping quiet. When you do this calculation, if you speak up, the risk to yourself is immediate. You're immediately risking putting yourself out there, like we all mentioned, that feeling of being rejected or made feel small. And the benefit is a bit uncertain. You don't know if this will pay off or not. Whereas if you keep quiet, the amount of risk is uncertain. We don't know exactly what the consequences will be for someone else, but the benefit is to yourself immediately, right? You immediately benefit because you don't put yourself out there, you don't take that interpersonal risk. So when we do that calculation, that's why keeping quiet very often wins. You can see there, the risk is uncertain, but the benefit is for yourself and it's immediate. Whereas speaking up, the benefit is uncertain and it's an immediate risk to yourself. So we do those kind of subconscious calculations. And that is why very often we tend to be on the keeping quiet side. Because if you don't want to look ignorant, you don't ask questions. If you don't want to look incompetent, you don't admit mistakes or weaknesses. Even if there's if you don't want to look negative, you don't offer critiques, you don't offer ideas against the status quo. So again, this is quite a natural process. We have to kind of consciously unlearn this process that we're all naturally doing. Okay. I just want to briefly highlight what psychological safety isn't, and then a bit about what it is. So it's not just about kind of being nice to everyone or just feeling good, but it is also about high performance. It's not about being undisciplined. There needs to also be accountability for performance. I think without accountability, it's not necessarily going to, psychological safety is not necessarily going to improve the team's performance. So it's not a case of saying whatever you want whenever you want. It's not that you will never feel any inner discomfort. It's not about just letting your emotions go as you please, not about taking risks and just hoping for the best. Leaders, it's not about the laissez-faire approach and just kind of leave people off and do whatever they want. And it's not that everything is tolerated. So there will still be some things that are not acceptable. It's not as if we have this environment where you can do whatever you want. So it is that you have the freedom to share your thoughts. And it's a space where people, you might feel a little bit uncomfortable, maybe voicing a mistake or speaking up against the status quo, but you still feel that your team has your back. There is that sense of support and ease. You're able to express concerns. You're able to take measured risks and consider the possible scenarios. Leaders will be allocating tasks and then coaching when needed. I think a couple of people mentioned coaching in the chat. And everything is considered. So it's having that open conversation. You want to kind of create an environment where, you're not telling people, right, one strike and you're out, but you also, you don't want to create that environment where you think, okay, we don't accept any dissenting views here. But at the same time, I suppose you need to be mindful of holding people accountable and being clear on what is unacceptable or what is blameworthy. So those are just, I suppose, just ways of kind of clarifying a little bit between what psychological safety isn't and what it is. And I wanted to just pop up a couple of statements that will give you an example of what psychological safety might sound like, right? So if you walked into a workplace and you overheard some of these kinds of statements, that might be a sign that they're in a psychologically safe environment. So someone saying, I've made a mistake, I wanted to let you know right away. I don't feel right about this. Can we pause and take a closer look? You might say, this is new territory. We're going to need everyone's input. And, you know, those first two especially, it's really kind of saying, it's not that you're saying, look, I have this problem, but I've already solved it, so don't worry. You know, it's going in and again being a bit vulnerable and saying, no, I haven't solved this, or I don't feel quite right and I'm not too sure, but I want to challenge it a little bit because there's something there. Maybe there's just even a gut feeling. So also inviting everyone's input, saying that there's many things changing or things that are unknown. We will make mistakes, you know, just clarifying that that's all right. You could ask, what assumptions are we making? What else could this be, or what are we missing? So again, say we're, you know, oh, we're coming up with a great idea, everyone's on board, brilliant. You know, there's the temptation to go, oh, great, we're all getting along, we're all coming up with a solution, let's do that. But it is worth challenging then, okay, well, hang on, is there anything we're missing here? Is there any assumptions we're making that we might be, that might lead us into problems in the future? Inviting participation in meetings. So Lucy, you look concerned, or John, you haven't said much. What are you thinking? What are you feeling? So there may always be quieter people on your team, you know, and maybe you're very used to hearing the voices of the most outgoing person or the highest paid person, you know, and maybe everyone kind of defers to them. But what about those people that are a little bit quieter? Try to bring in their participation as well. Asking people, what are you up against? What help do you need? What's in your way? You could ask that to your colleagues, but I think especially as a manager, those are great questions to bring in more often. You know, what kind of obstacles might you come up against and how can I help? Something that you could ask to reflect on something that's already happened. You could say, did everything go as smoothly as you would have liked? What were the friction points? So again, you'll notice that if someone asked me that, did everything go as smoothly as you would have liked? You know, if they asked instead, you know, what went wrong? What were the problems? You must have had problems. What went wrong? You might get a little bit defensive. You know, you might say, no, it was good. It was good. You know, you don't want to bring up the friction points maybe. But that question, you know, it's quite open. And it's just inviting a bit of reflection to go, okay, is there anything we would do a little bit differently next time? Another one that I quite like is, I made a typo there, what's one thing I need to know about you that will improve our relationship? So again, getting to know people, getting to know their strengths or what's important to them can help you work more effectively with them. Okay. So just looking at the chat there, Katrina, you were saying it's interesting that you said about vulnerability. Managing vulnerability is a skill set in itself, and not every manager can do it well. So maybe they default to a style that doesn't include recognition of vulnerability. Yeah, definitely. And like we said at the start, maybe that's just how you've learned to be a manager. You know, maybe all of your previous managers, you know, you have to behave in a certain way, you can't show any sort of vulnerability or weakness. And so they behave in that way and they default maybe to that style. So yeah, that's a really good point, Katrina. If anyone else has any questions or comments, pop them into the chat. But what I'd like to do is just invite you to have a chat in a breakout room. So again, you don't have to go into the breakout room if you don't want to, or if you're not able to. You'll have the option to just stay in the main session. But let's just have a little think. So say, for example, if you were a team leader, one question you might just ask is, how could you assess psychological safety within your team? So how could you figure out, do people feel safe to speak up or challenge or say that they made a mistake? And another conversation prompt then is, what questions could you ask yourself to assess if you're doing enough to develop psychological safety? So whether you're currently a team leader or you're not, you're putting yourself in the shoes of one for this conversation. And as I say, just discussing a little bit about how can you assess the environment in your team, how could you assess it for yourself? How could you kind of quiz yourself on, are you doing enough to develop psychological safety? So I'll open up breakout rooms for just about 10 minutes. And as I say, you don't have to go into them, but you can if you want to. Okay. So I am going to open up those rooms. You'll get an invitation to go into them on your screen in a minute. And as I say, feel free to have a bit of a chat. If anyone has any questions before I open those up, let me know. But if not, I'll just open those up and I will chat to you soon. Okay, people are heading out now. Just so you know, the breakout rooms aren't recorded. Okay, so one of the ways that you can measure or assess it in your team, it's pretty straightforward, actually, just 7 questions. And I'll share these with you in our resources folder that I have online. These are questions that you can ask your team. And again, it's available in Amy Edmondson's book, The Fearless Organization. And we have it as an online questionnaire as well, if anyone's interested in that. But basically, each team member responds to these 7 questions anonymously on a scale of 1 to 5, 1 being never, 5 being always. So say, for example, if you make a mistake on this team, it is often held against you. And this one is reverse scored. So if someone's saying always, that's a bad sign. If someone is saying never, that's a good sign. You know, it's a sign of high psychological safety if it's never held against you. Members on this team are able to bring up problems and tough issues. So if someone's saying always, that's a good sign of psychological safety. If someone's saying never, you know, you're never able to bring up problems and tough issues, might be a negative sign. And people on this team sometimes reject others for being different. Again, that's reverse scored. So hopefully you'll see people saying never or rarely ever. It's safe to take a risk on this team. We want people to say always or almost always. It's difficult to ask other members of this team for help. Again, that one's reverse scored. No one on this team would deliberately act in a way that undermines my efforts. Hopefully you're saying always. And working with members of this team, my unique skills and talents are valued and utilized. Okay, so these are questions, again, they're available in that book, The Fearless Organization. I can share them with you as well. And if you do have any interest in looking into this, maybe for your own team, we have this online questionnaire that allows us to generate a report and facilitate a team session around the results. So if you are interested, drop me an email. It's julie@jigsawbb.ie or message me on LinkedIn or anything like that. But we're just coming towards the end of the session. So I have this image here because, you know, when we talk about psychological safety, sometimes I can a little bit get kind of carried away because I'm like, it's brilliant, it's the answer to all the problems. It's not the only thing that matters. There are a lot of other things that will impact your team's ability to succeed. A lot of external factors, a lot of internal factors. But psychological safety is like the soil in which the seeds of business can grow. So if you've got that good quality soil, it'll set your team or your company up for success. because it's the right environment that they can grow and flourish in. Okay, so not the answer to all problems, but definitely a big part of teamwork. There's a couple of books then that I mentioned, The Fearless Organization being the main one by Amy Edmondson. She's, as I say, she's got TED Talks as well. So if you're not much of a reader, you prefer, you know, a nice little video, look up her talks. And there's also this one, Timothy R. Clark, The 4 Stages of Psychological Safety. So again, he talks about, you know, creating that inclusive, innovative environment that is very psychologically safe. I'll go on in a second to just say what our next event that's coming up is. But if anyone has any final questions or comments or anything like that, please do pop them into the chat. I'll also be hanging around after. So if anyone wants to chat to me afterwards, they can. But just to give you a heads up, for next month, 9th of November, we'll be talking about leadership, how to become a more authentic and transformational leader. So we'll talk a bit about what that means, why it's important, how to develop it, how to develop those necessary competencies that you might need for that. So that's up on Eventbrite at the moment. It'll be up on LinkedIn shortly as well. As always, you know, you can follow us on LinkedIn, follow Jigsaw Better Business. You can join. We have a group on LinkedIn. If you search, never mind the buzzwords, you can tick the mailing list and we'll send you out information about upcoming sessions, as well as the recordings from previous sessions, as well as the resources that we mention in the session. So that is all from me today. Thank you very much for joining me, and thank you all for your contributions into the chat, and hope you enjoyed the breakout room and got something from that. I'll hang around now for another couple of minutes. Good to see all the positive comments, so thank you very much for joining me, and I'll hopefully see you again soon, maybe at the next session on the 9th of November. Thanks everyone.